to tonight's show. This is an episode of Pizza Punk. So welcome to Pizza Punk. I don't even think Frank knows that this is Pizza Punk. But generally when we do interviews, he's shaking it. He's going, what? Generally when we do interviews, generally the interviews on this channel, I'll categorize them in Pizza Punk, which is generally aimed towards music. But every once in a while we have someone from the movies. Like we had William Stout, the production designer of Return of the Living Dead and He-Man Masters of the Universe. We had Brian Yuzna from Society and Beyond Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator and stuff. That hasn't dropped yet. We've had a bunch of film related people. We had James Marandino from SLC Punk, director of SLC Punk. That was a fun show. And while this show can primarily be music oriented, we do, as I'm a filmmaker. That is what I do more than even being a YouTuber. I'm a filmmaker, and we like to cover and discuss film related stuff. Now, I'm going to give a little brief intro, and then I'm going to bring Frank out of the green room real quick. And a question, and I'm going to leave this for Frank because he could ponder it. Sorry, Frank. This is a question I ask all of my guests, as some of you out there know. We ask the question, it's the thesis question of the show. Doesn't matter if you're into music, doesn't matter if you're a movie man. Is pizza punk? And if pizza is punk, why is it punk or why is it not punk? It is a totally subjective answer. There's no right or wrong way to answer the question. It's just, I just want to hear what you think, Frank. So think about that question while I do this little intro thing real quick. And please excuse me, I've had too much dairy today and I'm a little sick. So I got I'm a little sniffly. I took some of those digestive enzymes, which really help with lactose. I know that's something that everybody wants to hear about right now, right? Like you just were dying to know what my situation was. Basically, here's what happened. As you all know, I am a diehard Alamo nut. I love going to Alamo Drafthouse. It is my sanctuary, my cathedral, my synagogue, my hideaway, my place to get away from it all. And I will go. I mean, I won't see anything, but I'll see almost anything, especially if it's horror related. I always try to go as 31 Days of Halloween, and 31 Days of Halloween is where I do a movie review every day of whatever I'm seeing. And I saw that just randomly they had a double feature of Spookies and this documentary. I didn't know it was a documentary at the time. And so I went there and as it turns out, it was this whole to do, and it had not only was it a double feature, but the makers of Spookies were in the friggin' audience along with Michael Gingold, who you might know from Rue Morgan, Fangoria, and whatnot. I believe the Suckling as well. And Mike had actually co-directed a documentary called Twisted Tale, which is the original name of Spookies. Spookies is a title that I've always seen on the shelves growing up. It's just a movie I never got around to. I was like, okay, great. This is perfect. I want to see it on the big screen. I knew absolutely nothing about this movie. I go in, I watch the movie. Holy shit. We're going to talk about the holy shit in 1 second, but here's what happened afterwards. So I'm driving home and I'm doing a real quick off the cuff review, no editing, just a off the top of my dome review. Cause I got to keep that quota for 31 Days of Halloween, right? I got to do a review every day, which was a slog in and of itself. And lo and behold, one of the filmmakers, one of the producers of Spookies stumbled upon my review and shared it. And I was like, this is so cool. And then I realized he was there. They were all there at the thing. So we were in the same screening. I just got to see Spookies with all of the people that made Spookies, but I didn't get to stick around for the second movie because I had to leave. I literally had to go, and I was really upset. I didn't know anything about what it was about. I later found out during the screening it was a making of documentary, which made me more angry because I had so many goddamn questions. I needed the questions answered. And after talking with Frank, who's an awesome dude, who also friggin' also helped make friggin' Street Trash. He's part of the Street Trash crew. I was like, which is, a staple for me. So I was like, oh my God, I got to get this guy on the show. We got to talk to him. Apart from also that the Spookies was made right here in my neck of the woods. And what really like stokes me when I like discover stuff like that, I consider myself, I'm a regional filmmaker. I've made 2 feature films right here in White Plains. I want to be like those guys that just make movies right in their hometown. So to hear that Spookies was shot right in Rye, New York, which is where I used to work, I used to commute there every day. It just really, it charges me up, man. And so without further ado, enough introduction, I want to bring out Frank Farel, and I hope I'm saying your last name right, Frank. You'll correct me in just a moment. I want to welcome him to the show and bring him out to talk about his body of work. Welcome to the show, Frank. How you doing?
Hey there, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great, especially after watching that documentary.
I'm so glad you got to see that, because that puts an entirely different slant on the movie itself.
Yes. So just to fill in super quick, there was Vinegar Syndrome released Vinegar Syndrome, a boutique label that they do stellar releases. Steven says, welcome to Frank. They do these stellar releases, man, for movies that are either old staples that have, only been on VHS, or maybe they got a small DVD release, or they give them these big deluxe Blu-ray jobs, and Spookies got that, and people were stoked. I remember, I hadn't even seen it, but I remember people were freaking out. They were so stoked.
Well, that Spookies largely because Spookies is a movie that got released in the mid 80s. I think the official video release date was like 86, and it had not seen a release on any kind of video format in the US since that time.
Crazy.
And that's kind of unusual, because like almost everything is out there on a DVD these days.
Right. I mean, you still have to this day, there are lots of esoteric 80s films that are just still like kind of like lost in the either. Yet like Scorpion and Code Red,
they're showing up all the time. It's really amazing, because I consider myself somewhat of an authority, and I've seen thousands of films, it seems, or at least I've heard titles if I haven't seen them. And there have been films coming out on Blu-ray in recent years that, like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? Where did this come from? Lots of them.
It's exciting, man. It's really, it's weird, because we're watching like the death of things on some levels, and then on other levels, you have these boutique labels that are giving these beautiful, beautiful releases to films that nobody would have given a shit about like 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Suddenly they're getting these deluxe treatments, and there is a small but rabid fan base for them. And it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. So,
yeah. And it's actually, I don't know how small it is, because I mean, they Vinegar Syndrome and several other companies have really driven this market up into a, as you say, a boutique collector's market.
Oh yeah, very much so. And that's the thing. When you get one of these releases, they're like, first of all, they're like works of art. That's number one. And number two, they become collector's pieces. It's almost like they almost become art pieces in a way. And I'll tell you, when those things go out of print, or when they make their way through a run, they are worth vast, large sums of money. It's insane.
No, it's amazing. It's been an interesting process, because I mean, the fact is also, at the same time, a lot of movies you'll find for $100, $200, $300 or more dollars sometimes on eBay, VHS copies.
VHS, yes.
You might still wander into a thrift store somewhere and find the same movie for 50 cents.
Yes.
There's very little conscious understanding of this beyond the collectors who are used to paying high prices in many cases.
Well, interesting is some people want to pay that high price because it's the VHS, and some people want to pay the high price because it's out of print. And a great example over there on the shelf, I have Mondo Trasho on VHS, which will never be released because of the music. It will never be on Criterion. It will never. John Waters.
Yeah.
It goes for a lot of money, because it's that they can't do anything with it. So that inherently increases value. But then you have movies that do have Blu-ray releases, but people want the VHS clamshell box, you know, the big clamshell box of Microwave Massacre, and it goes, you know, it goes through the roof. You know, it's insane.
Yeah. See, I have to confess, and I've told fans this before, that I don't have the same relationship with VHS that a lot of fans do, partially because for years I collected 16 millimeter. And
Wow.
I had actual films. And to me, an artifact is a film that you can actually hold in your hands and hold up to the light. All right, here are the pictures on the film that when the light through them and the real move, you can see a moving image.
It's a tangible, artifact for you. Now let me run with that for a minute, because, you know, my generation feel the same way about VHS and DVDs in that kind of way.
Same exact thing. The other option is streaming now.
Right, because now movies are just zeros and ones. They're all digital, or they're in the computer. So it's like when I go over to my shelf and I'm holding a cassette tape, even if I can't shine a light through the videotape, to me, I'm like, this is the movie. There's the cover art. The cover art exists, therefore the movie exists. But now it's just all at your fingertips, and it can go away any second. That's the problem with streamers, is that they take them down whenever they feel like it, and then you don't have the movie anymore. You know, it's like you're leasing the titles. You know,
it definitely makes sense to grab a copy of any movie that really means anything to you, certainly. But the fact is, I can't really bitch about anything, because there are more movies available more easily than ever before.
It's so true.
And I look for, and I'm not, you know, my interests are not mainly, or not specifically just confined to horror. I love movies of all types, all kinds, all eras of cinema, all countries.
Yeah.
Something's interesting, I'll track it down. So
you're a cinema lover. What happened to your collection of 16 millimeters? It still exists in some shape or form?
At some point years ago, I left it in the hands of my partner from Spookies, Brendan Faulkner, who was one of the co-directors, and we fell out of touch for years. In the interim, he sold off my films.
Oh my God. That's so crazy. I mean, those prints today, you could like lease them to like friggin' you know, screenings and stuff.
There's still lots of 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter collectors, surprising number of 35 millimeter collectors.
Yeah.
And I think prints have become, films have become even, greater, value, original objects.
Oh yeah.
That, I have managed and booked movie theaters, and I became very used to just being film.
Right. Okay, so where do we begin with? Well, first of all, first thing I learned from this documentary, and again, I was, as I said, I was glad I watched the documentary, because now I can ask this question, which I would not have thought to ask. I did not know you were with Roy when you took the road trip when he was shooting Document of the Dead, and you were there. You're in Dawn of the Dead.
Oh yeah. And I'm briefly in the documentary.
You're the seltzer zombie.
Yes, I am.
I mean, that's, what's so crazy about that to me? Like, because now, and especially talk about like revered fan bases for films, like, Dawn of the Dead it's like, the fever is insane.
I can't believe Dawn of the Dead just keeps marching on like it does after all this time, including a Halloween release in 3D this past October.
Yeah, which was Richard did well with that one. He did bang up business. But what's amazing is you drove down and you saw them making an independent film. But now it's interesting how, like, once a film is shot, once it's canonized in those moving images, like you were talking about, where it's like solidified as this celluloid world that you can step into once light is shown through it, it's now so much more. You've had these two very unique experiences, where you've had the experience of the movie, as we all have, and you have this experience where you were there when it wasn't a movie, where they were just a bunch of guys in a mall shooting, like shooting anything and everything. I mean, it's great. That is so crazy to me.
That was a great opportunity, because I had already been a great fan of Night of the Living Dead.
Wow.
Even to the extent I first heard about Night of the Living Dead when I read Roger Ebert's original review of it back from 1968, right?
Wow.
Now, not that many people are aware of this, but Roger Ebert at that time wrote this unbelievably negative review. Do you know this?
Yes, yes.
And I read it in Reader's Digest.
Wow.
Right? Where it was like reprinted, and it was basically like this horrendous, gory movie is being shown at kiddie matinees, and this, and Ebert just destroyed the film. Years later, he basically apologized to Romero and to his readers that, all right, this was a really wrong call. And I don't know if this is before or after, but it was around the time Dawn of the Dead came out, which he gave a highly positive review.
Good on him, because like that doesn't happen today. Nobody ever admits it when they're wrong. The fact that he could, and especially when you're like a critic where like your word is the be all end all of something, like to be like, hey, I've changed my opinion about this movie. This movie is awesome, and I was wrong. And I think that's pretty great that he was able to do that.
The tone of the thing was basically that, you don't want your kids seeing this. And it really, it was unable to judge the movie fairly with that as the point of view, which it sounded like the kind of thing that some editor said, hey, you need to cover this movie and be negative.
Well, here's the interesting thing, and maybe you will know this history better than I. First of all, I just want to qualify and say that when pressed, when barred, when someone says to me, what is your favorite movie of all time? I don't have an actual favorite movie of all time, but I'll always say Night of the Living Dead, because to me, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it. I'm in such awe of this movie.
We're in agreement with that. And to tell the truth, I have a similar problem with the same question. And especially, in interviews, people say, what is your favorite movie? Or what are your favorite movies? I'll say, I don't know. Do you have like 4 days and we could discuss?
Right. It's so subjective, man. And so it's like, it's easier. It's easier to call it that, but it really is. It really is. And I have, talked my face. I've talked my face blue talking about the epicness of Night of the Living Dead. And I've steeped myself in the history. I even worked on a documentary in college. I was an assistant editor about the life and times of George Romero. It was called Dead On, the life and times of George Romero was being made by this filmmaker in Chicago. So I spent a lot of time around a lot. That's where I really learned about all the players in the Romero verse.
Well, for me, it was great to be able to get that opportunity to visit George's set on Dawn, because
Unreal.
It became a key film to me. I read that review, that Ebert review, right? And I was determined to see this film, and it was no longer in theaters. Then I became one of the organizers of a film society in high school, right? And that was like literally the first film we mapped out a schedule of films. We got financing this film from the school. First film, Night of the Living Dead, right? And it had no reputation at that time, really.
Here's my question. Here's my question. This is what I wanted to ask you, and I was curious to know. And I mean, you really are the perfect person to ask this. Wasn't there, and please correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Night of the Living Dead one of the motivations behind the restricted rated R rating, because of what you were saying? Because parents or people were bringing kids to this movie and
I don't know.
not knowing.
I forget exactly what year those particular ratings began.
I think it was I don't know if it was 68. It might have been 70, 71, something around there.
It was in the 60s, but I forget what year they started instituting.
We can actually find this. I'm going to find this out right now.
I don't know. I mean, I can't believe it, because first of all, it was not a very widely distributed film at the time. It played, the usual grindhouse circuit, but it
right.
And it's not like it was infamous as something. It was basically horror fans started to notice it and say, hey, this is something different and it's exceptional.
Okay, so it started in 1968.
All right.
And then wait, hold on. Let's see if they mention Night of the Living Dead. I should have just done this in the first place. No, it's not even on here. You would think they would have said something about it. I guess not.
Well, the thing is, first of all, it was in black and white, which may have given it a little bit of away. But it wasn't exactly there were gorier movies that had been the Herschel Gordon Lewis movies,
right? Blood Feast.
Yeah, they're those are basically just explicitly these
Eyes
are
Without a
horrible.
Face.
Yeah, but more of an art film, I'd say that.
Right, that's more of an art film, and so is there's another one that is, I think it came out the same year as Eyes. Yeah, but when I'm thinking about like films that had straight up gore in them pre-Blood Feast, you have Eyes Without a Face, which shows a woman's face coming off, and you have I'm going to probably butcher this name. It's a Japanese salaryman picture from either 1959 or 1960 called Jigoku, something like that. It's in Criterion, and that shows a dude. That shows a dude's like open, like stripped body.
Wait,
like you see a lot of horror.
That's Jigoku. That's Japanese for hell, and I've seen the
yes,
film. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what happens. Yes, he goes to hell, and his flesh is stripped from his body. I don't know if that was 1960 or 1959, but it was
1960, and it's actually it's I mean, to tell the truth, I mean, Japanese films are just so casually full of explicit stuff going back.
It's a different culture. Yeah.
I mean, there's I mean, I've seen things that like I saw a film from the mid 60s called the other day called Fighting Elegy, right? And it takes place in post-war Japan, and it's about the aggressiveness of Japanese youth after the war, looking, like they had no place to go to feel proud or part of something, or right after World War II was lost. And so, and this is essentially about this one character's sexual frustration resulting in his aggressiveness, and some of it is just like incredibly clever, but it's like, like mid 60s. There's a scene where he basically is like with this girl that he really, really likes, but everything has to be very proper and formal and etc. And he's in the room with her piano at one point, and he starts playing the keys with his heart on. And it's it's a comedy.
I mean, that takes talent. That's in the 60s. That's crazy.
1965. This is like so far afield from anything going on.
That's crazy
at that time.
Let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about Spookies. And again, I explained in the intro, I said it makes me stoked. Like any movie that's shot in Westchester, like always like ramps me up, because I decided about 10 years ago, I was like, I'm not going to try and go to LA. I'm not going to try and like go to anywhere. I'm just going to stay here and make little micro budget feature length films in my backyard and just do
now that it's possible to do that the technology is there, and that you can come up with a really nice looking end product if you just have some artistic sensibility and you take the time and trouble to do things properly.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, that was one of the notes I have up here, because when I was watching this documentary, everybody should see, first of all, if you haven't seen Spookies, go check it out. It took me 36 years. Spookies came out in 86. I was born in 85. It took me a very long time to see Spookies.
It's not that easy to see for a long time.
That's true. That's true. In fairness to me, it was not that easy, but I remember seeing it on the shelves. It's just, when you're young and there's a million films to watch, and, I go to the clerk and I say, give me, what is the absolute goriest thing, or what is the thing that has the most tits, Yeah, exactly. And that was a whole thing in that was part of the making Spookies, was that it couldn't be gory because you're trying to sell it on the market. But but that was an interesting reoccurring theme that I know, guys, we're just going to jump all over the place between the documentary and Spookies itself. That was an interesting reoccurring theme that I noticed for you guys when making Spookies, is that there were so many roadblocks or obstacles in your way for whatever was going on. And it almost was due to technology, because I was thinking in my head, as you guys are, we have to dupe that. We wanted to do a 3/4 master. We needed to do this before they noticed all the film was gone. And I just kept thinking in my head, I said, God, if they just had today's technology, half of these problems wouldn't have even been problems. They would have been able to.
I mean, we could have gone in there and whipped it out ourselves.
Right.
At the time, I mean, that became a bit, a sort of one of the central issues in that, I continued to work for years with my partner, Tom Doran, who passed away before it happened recently. and he was, he and Brendan were like, we got to get a copy of this just to have a copy of it before something is done to it. And I mean, to be able to do that, I mean, it would have involved taking out all these reels of 35 millimeter film with soundtracks, right? So you're talking about like maybe
explain that to the audience, like in very simple terms, why that is so complicated.
Because, well, you've got the film itself, which in this case is a print from the negative that's used to edit. That's what you're cutting. And then you have a soundtrack, or possibly several soundtracks.
Separate. It's separate.
It's separate, and it's on 35 millimeter magnetic stock, like the kind of magnetic
keep talking.
The kind of magnetic tape used to record things before the age of digital sound. And that alone would be, I mean, like, we're talking like several hundred pounds of film and cans and reels, and then getting it into a place. I mean, the real obstacle there is we would have done it. Yeah, there's film.
So there's 35, right, people? This is 35 film, and you could see that there's an optical track on the side. But if they were using a rough cut or whatever, a work print, it's known as a work print.
The optical track only was added after everything was synchronized and finalized, and that was how the film was put in theaters.
Now here's the other thing that Frank is talking about. I should have brought this out in the first place because this just makes it all easier. Hold on. This is what's known as mag track, right? Isn't that the name for it? Mag track?
With strips, because it's stereo.
Right. So, if you're an editor today, if you're editing like me or anybody, if you're in Adobe, you will see that you have 3 digital tracks. You have your picture track. Let's say that you have just one layer of video. Here's your picture track. Pretend this is our vertical timeline in your computer on your laptop. And then you generally, if it's in stereo, you're going to have 2 audio tracks. That's what this is. See that? That is literally what this is. As he said, that's 2 lines of magnetic tape. Now imagine you're Frank and his crew, and you guys are trying to sneak out the film intact. You got to locate this. You have to locate this, and you have to get all of it out of there and back in time.
But the real problem with that situation, I don't remember whether this was in the documentary, but we had an editor who was a friend of ours who we had technically hired. Our company had hired him.
You mentioned that in the doc, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. And he would not surrender the material to us. Because he was technically getting paid by our backer, Michael Lee. And at the time, we probably could have legally challenged him. But I mean, we were a little bit naive in many ways. But I regret that we didn't get a hold of that, because to tell the truth, even if we just had a video transfer of that at this time, I can't tell you how many people would want to see it. Every time I talk to anybody, they ask me if there's a chance that version will show up.
Now, that is completely lost forever. There's no way.
As far as I can get to what a final word has to be, and that comes from Michael Lee himself being asked. There's on the Blu-ray, there's another documentary about Vipco, the old video nasties company that existed in the UK.
Right.
This is how this man made all of his money that he was able to use to finance our film. And he goes on at length about a lot of things, but one of the things he supposedly said to the people working on it off camera when they asked him about that is he said, "Oh no, that's all gone a long time ago." So he just trashed it.
The way you describe him in the documentary, and just his poor common sense and just his the ridiculous things that he was saying as a non-filmmaker trying to influence the filmmaking of the film. It is possible maybe that he threw it away, or maybe I'd like to hope take some solace that maybe it was lying.
Every time I tell someone the footage no longer exists. Okay, look, I agree. I hope so too.
Let's hope that, and let's take some solace in perhaps maybe either because he didn't know, because he wanted to just randomly put someone in a gorilla suit for 2 seconds, or add farting noises to these muck men. Let's hope that he thought mistook, or that it's in some sort of wrong can. How many times have lost films resurfaced? And I mean, look at like Nosferatu. The story of Nosferatu is insane.
Accompanied by a story from the man who had possession of the footage, saying, "I put that in the trash."
So he thinks. It's, you know what it is? It's like when you're watching a TV show or a movie, if you don't see them die, then they're not really dead. And so if I want to hope, maybe I'm just being too optimistic here, but I want to hope. I mean, look at what happened with Nightbreed. That was impossible.
No,
the fact that Nightbreed got restored.
The thing is, it's just a matter of, at some point in the process, if somebody grabbed a copy or made a copy of something, things like that happen all the time.
Or just mislabeled. It could be in the wrong can.
That happens probably more than anything, just about.
Right. I mean, look what happened. Speaking of Romero, we were told, and I'm sure Frank knows what I'm talking about here. We were told that the 3.5 hour cut of Martin,
yes, I knew,
black and white, that it does not exist anymore. That it once did. I knew it existed because I asked John Amplis about it, and he told me it existed, but that it was gone. It was impossible that we would never see. Like, just trying to imagine that there's 2 hours and some change extra footage of. There's that much more story to Martin.
I've heard about it. I actually spoke to someone who had seen it.
Wow, really?
But the thing is, from what I mean, at 3.5 hours, that has to be very similar to what our first cut of Spookies was like. Meaning, it's like it's a rough cut. It's just
of course it is.
I'm sure it's all, it's not tightly edited. I'm sure it's got all kinds of mistakes and bad shots and all kinds of other things. It's just an assembly of footage.
Yeah, but that's why. But we're not. At that point, if you're watching a 3.5 hour version of Martin, which is really a 90-minute story, as George Romero intended to be, you're watching that for the historical. You're watching that because you want to see every stick of footage.
I watch a ton of stuff for that reason. So that's just second nature to me. It's like, if there's a film that I like or I'm interested in, and there's another version, or if I hear that the uncut version is like so much better, I really want to see that.
Like for instance, there is a supercut. There's a fan edit of Dawn of the Dead, which takes all of, because originally I believe that there was something, the original assembly. This is mind-boggling. The original assembly of Dawn of the Dead that Romero gave to Dario Argento is like 4 hours long. And he said, here, you cut yours down and I'll cut mine. And we got the theatrical cut, which is George's preferred director's cut. There's the Cannes cut, which is longer. And then we got Dario Argento's batshit cut. I think the European cut is absolutely batshit crazy, because we lose great swaths of plot that like literally make the movie not make sense. The real
difference, as far as I'm concerned, because I was actually surprised by this when I eventually saw the Argento cut, is that it's more than anything, it's an action movie.
Right? Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Whereas the Romero film was always thought of as, all right, here's a horror action film, and that was kind of a unique animal at that time. In fact, the film
very much so.
The time it was made and came out, it was very unique and very innovative.
Very much so. And so the idea that like these things exist in some way, shape, or form are, I think that there is so much more under the surface than any of us can possibly imagine. Every 80-minute film ever out there, apart from like animated, comes from hours and hours and hours of footage. I mean, yes, of course, there are things that have very low shooting ratios. I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but like the idea being that even the most obscure, whatever, direct-to-video movie probably comes from like a 2 or 3 hour rough cut, like it's crazy when you think about it. I mean, think that people say that it's the 1 page to 1 minute ratio. And that's not always true.
I as a writer and a filmmaker, I found that at least for me, it's absolutely inapplicable to what I do. Meaning, something depends heavily on like, how does the director interpret it?
Absolutely.
what is, if I mean, you can take a page and I think you could turn it into 20 seconds or 10 seconds, or you could turn it into 5 minutes, depending on what you want to do.
And that's what I personally learned that making movies. I had, I wrote a 72-page script that was 100 minutes, and I had to cut it down. I cut it down to 82 minutes. But that's when I first learned that's the case. And so I thought about the first screenplay I ever wrote, which was 120 pages. I thought, my God, that very possibly could be 3-hour, 4-hour movie if it was shot the way that it was. So I think it's a very subjective thing, and you just really don't know ultimately. But so and then another interesting thing that I noticed that I was really shocked by when watching the documentary Spookies is Gabe Bartalos. How do I say his last name?
Oh, yes.
Bartalos. Gabe, like, here's the thing, and Frank, please speak to this more than me, because you probably know all these people. Like, I've been talking recently on the channel about, like, there was absolutely like this. There was almost like this, or at least I like to imagine from a historical perspective, there was this like this little New York independent horror scene that was sort of everywhere in, around the city and whatnot. You had movies like I Was a Teenage Zombie.
In the city, especially. I mean,
there
were a lot of low budget exploitation films in
Basket
general.
Case, Brain Damage.
But the thing is, I mean, there were independent filmmakers and people like Henenlotter and doing his own thing, and then there were all companies like Troma who were essentially trying to make their own productions and then release them.
And then you had Street Trash,
right?
So I mean, but what's interesting is that Gabe is like this weird thread that sort of goes through all of those films. I mean, he worked on everything. He worked on so much stuff. Blew my mind.
Stuff. And I mean, I'm proud to say that Spookies was really his first, and he stepped up. He was originally the first assistant, and then we had an issue with our original effects person, and Gabe was asked, "Well, can you handle this?" And
rise to the occasion.
I'm sure there's no way he would have said no, but he was really capable of it. I mean, he did something that I think a lot of people with a lot more experience or knowledge even at that time could not necessarily have done or wouldn't have attempted, because he took he did a lot of the design work. He did a lot of figuring out mechanics of things. It ultimately, I'm really proud of the fact that this was his first real project. He went on to become a top Hollywood makeup man, as did Vince Costini, who worked with us also, and as really did Jennifer Aspinall, who became quite prolific in television, especially won Emmy Award.
Emmy.
Yeah, and I think we were just lucky that we happened to know these people in the first place. And and at the time, all of us, effects people, people doing tech work, myself and my partners, we were all just trying to find some ground to give us, a chance to start making films.
Right. And I mean, it's just cool when you find your crew, when you find your people. By the way, real quick before we move on, Gary Axe is asking about New York Ripper, and my friend Brian here is asking about New York Ninja. Are you familiar with either one of these movies?
Well, New York Ninja I haven't seen yet, but New York Ninja is a film that was essentially made in the 80s. Vinegar Syndrome bought like the rough footage. The film was apparently completed and never released.
Oh my Lord.
They edited it, they dubbed it, they put in a music track. And my pals Michael Gingold and Glenn Baisley, who did the Spookies documentary, were asked to come in and do a making of and a documentary on that, which they did. And I want to see that, because it should be interesting.
Oh man, me too.
Like, the fans are thrilled to get a hold of something like that. All right, a completely unreleased movie that's a typical grindhouse action movie from that period.
Sure, absolutely. What was I about to ask you about? We were talking about I got my brain. Wait, okay, now I remember what I'm on. Okay, I have a lot of questions. So I'm watching this movie and
Yeah,
now I understand.
New York Ripper, by the way, New York Ripper I've seen. That's a
Oh, okay.
Lucio Fulci movie, if I remember.
Was it shot that was shot in New York though?
Well, it was like a million Italian pictures at that movie. They'd come in and shoot for like
Right.
3 days in New York City and then
Exteriors. Yeah.
make you believe the whole movie was set in New York City.
Like Zombie, they did the scene on the
Yeah,
Brooklyn Bridge.
yeah.
Brian says he saw New York Ninja at the Alamo about a month ago. Brian is affiliated with the Genre Blast Film Festival out in Winchester, Virginia. They do it at the Alamo Draft House. I'm wearing the hat for it right here.
We just did a
Tremendous festival.
at the Alamo in Yonkers, and that's why
Right.
he's here.
But I gotta tell you, it's an incredible fest out there. They do all sorts of great stuff with genre films. I'm a big fan of the Genre Blast Film Festival, and that's where yeah, and I'm yes, in general, I'm an Alamo nut, as you could see. But what I wanted to ask you about, now I remember. Okay, so I am still trying. So here's the thing. Even though you guys started making the movie and then another, obviously there was a changing of regimes and somebody else completed the movie and turned it into what I said in my initial review. This is and I'm sure that it must have been interesting on some level. I had never seen it before. So I was getting that was my perspective from just blindly seeing this movie without knowing anything about it. I knew nothing about the thing. It really it felt like there was like 3 different movies going on all at the same time because there was.
And
but
that's the same. It's the thing that delights a lot of fans who really just find it fun and funny because of that.
So fun.
And other people find it incredibly frustrating. And I think those are usually the people who will negatively react to the film.
You want to know something though, and I can't even imagine. I do know I've been in a similar situation with both of my features. My first feature, I wasn't able to shoot the third act that I had written on the script.
Right.
I had to change the whole third act, and the movie came out as it is a fractured version of what my vision is. And I will tell you that I'm very proud of it. It's my child, the way our movies are our children, right? But somewhere deep down inside of my heart is the constant like gnawing of, but you didn't get to see what I originally intended, damn it. And I empathize with that frustration that I saw in the documentary when you guys were expressing such a thing. I mean, it's frustrating. My second feature, I ended up making a sequel to a movie that never existed because it was the only way to complete with what the footage that I had. I took the footage from the first movie and then I shot a sequel to that footage. So the original film doesn't actually exist. And it's a sequel with no original movie. It was the only way to complete the movie. And, and that's what I mean, like where things get juxtaposed. And I saw that a lot in Spookies.
Well, I mean, look, what happened to Spookies in its most essential form has happened to thousands of movies throughout movie history.
Sure.
Somebody takes it and does whatever they want in terms of the cutting and puts in new scenes or takes out.
Well, that's even worse. That's even worse because you want to know something? At least it's like in one scenario, it's like, oh, well, that's the person making a decision to salvage what they started. In your situation, you had your thing taken from you. And we
chose to walk off the film, but we walked off after being basically abused every day for months.
Sure. Can I ask you honestly, and if you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to answer this question. But when you think about it, all these years later, and you I'm sure you must replay it in your head on once in a while, in some way, shape, or form. Would you have done things differently? Or do you think that
because at the time, I mean, imagine, this was the first chance we had a real opportunity. We had done other things and been involved with other things and shot parts of other things, but the something where like, all right, here's the money that will be given to you to make this. I think what we really could have done, had we been savvy enough, had we been like, experienced enough, was that probably the thing to do, because the real problem my partners and I had with this guy was that he had issues with them, and because they were in the cutting room cutting every day, and he was with us for like most of the cutting in the editing.
Yeah, but he was incoherent. From everything I saw in that documentary, from what you guys were saying, he was clearly an incoherent person. He was telling you that he wanted, why not just, it's taking too long. Remove the middle part of the scene so that it goes faster. Like the guy was incoherent.
He was growing increasingly unhappy with the movie as we were cutting it, right?
Right.
And but and he gave us a certain amount of leeway. And what really changed things, that it's mentioned in the doc, that somebody who I knew, that I had when I worked at United Artists, an executive there was Tom Gray, who eventually worked for Golden Harvest Pictures in Hong Kong. And he came to a screening of it that Michael insisted on having, that we didn't want. This is our rough cut. Shouldn't be seen by anyone, really.
Yeah, that made me so frustrated when you said that. That was so, oh my God, that made me so mad.
That sort of soured him and turned him into like this even more raving lunatic.
But it was his fault. It was his fault. Like, what's up, Aaron? How are you? How are you, fellow Aaron? Welcome to tonight's show. No, yeah, but that's like the other crazy thing too. And that's like a great lesson. Filmmakers should really watch this movie as a parable too, to like understand the types of things.
That's how I feel about it. That it's it's something that any filmmaker can learn something from.
Yeah, I learned a lot from watching that. And one thing I think I already knew this. But it was so completely confirmed for me. And it's this. It's an extension of the adage of don't show your actor their rushes, or don't let the actor see stuff that's not completed, especially if it's a micro, no budget film. And the extension is don't show anybody your cut until it's in until the filmmaker feels confident presenting it. Because what he did to you guys, which was so, I mean, just literally the worst thing that he could do. He took a movie that was not completed, showed it to freaking distributors who don't understand, who maybe they know a lot about distribution, but who knows if they know about the mechanics of an in the process film, and said, oh, it moves too slow. Of course you're going to think it moves too slow. The movie's not completed. What are you doing? And then him getting upset about it.
Plus, he showed it to a man who was representing a Hong Kong company. Hong Kong movies were at the time, and maybe I don't know if they still are as much, but were like the fastest moving movies in the world.
Sure, the pacing, yes,
right. And that was one of the objections. He basically said, I can't sell this in the territory I work from. I mean, this is just way too slow moving.
And what he did, and so again, Spookies is literally a parable of what happens when here's a great analogy, and it really, I suppose it applies mainly to like raising children, but the analogy is the butterfly in the cocoon. And it's that, the caterpillar must open its cocoon, or the butterfly must burst out of its cocoon by itself. If you try to help it in any way, shape, or form, then it won't pump enough blood into its wings to make them strong enough so that it could fly on its own. So by tampering with it, you end up destroying what it could be. And that's exactly what Michael Lee did to Twisted Tale, and by turning it into Spookies.
I mean, unfortunately, that was his business method, which was essentially sleaze and pressure and bullying and I just think he came from a background and a way of achieving success that depended heavily on not being the best person in the world, shall we say.
Commerce. You guys You guys were raw, pure, young-blooded filmmakers looking to do your thing, and you're coming from the art side of things, and he's coming from the commerce side of things. And art and commerce have to intersect if you want to make more art. But the problem is
that's the classic mix in filmmaking. That's always the conflict. In this case, though, I just I felt we came at it so sincerely, so earnestly, so clear that all we wanted to do was make the best film we could. That's all we wanted to do, and we wanted to save as much money as possible and not have more expense. And he at every juncture, he just sort of like was paranoid and accusatory, and essentially thought we were working against him and trying to cheat him in some way. Virtually anytime anything happened that was not to his liking.
Okay, I have questions now that I need answers to. Okay. Question number one. What is the dude wearing a black leather Flash Gordon outfit? Why is he wearing? That's what I thought when I saw it. I saw that white stripe, and I was like, because I did a double take when I'm in the theater. I'm going, wait, what is he wearing? Is he wearing a Flash Gordon leather jumpsuit, but it's black with the white stripe, and he's like this, sort of like Italian tough guy kind of character. Right. And I'm going, what's going on?
The first thing I'll say is it was a better decision than the red one with the yellow stripe.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
That was gotten. I mean, we got all of our ward. We went to clothing companies essentially and said, "All right, look, give us some ward clothing for our character. We'll give you a plug in the film's credit."
That's amazing.
Right? And this was some place that was trying to make all kinds of what I guess they considered to be, hip and new wave clothing.
That's amazing,
right? And I even at the time when we were using it, we sort of we're like, all right, well, this almost borders on parody, but
I just can't
because it was an outfit nobody had seen in a film before.
That is true. That is very true. And that was that was kind of like my reaction over and over again watching Spookies, and I loved it. I don't know if you heard me cackling out loud with delight. I was just laughing. Yeah, well, I was one of those people. I was cackling with laughter every few seconds. Just, and I saw it by myself. I didn't go with people. And Spookies is the type of movie that you have to watch with your friends, and you have to pause the movie every 5 minutes to talk about and process what is happening, why it's happening, what the motivation is, why this is what it is. Like, for instance, I have another question. Why is the older guy there, and why is he friends? How do these people know each other?
As you are more or less aware, all that stuff was added by the director of the additional footage that was added.
Right.
And I, as far as I can understand it, that went from Michael originally discussing with this woman, coming in to re-edit and finish the film. Right. Then they realized that the climax, which was supposed to have optical work by a member of our original production, couldn't be done, cheaply the way we said we could do, which we could have done. And this would suddenly require thousands more dollars just to do these effects for the climax, which is why zombies now figure prominently in the climax, even though we were originally told not to have zombies.
It was so bizarre. And then I'm trying to decide, is this okay? So I wasn't sure. That was one element. I was trying to figure out, I was like, first of all, is this weird guy that's in the coffin? Is he part of which part of the movie is he part of? Quite clearly he is not. He was an added on him and the cat boy and
all anything that seems like it has nothing to do with the characters who come to the mansion is basically added.
Right. And that's what I mean though by but here's the thing. Even though it's crazy, and even though it doesn't work, it kind of does in the way that, and here's the thing, cinema at its most purest, and this was the thesis of the little review I did.
Right.
Cinema at its most purest form is juxtaposition. I'm taking this image and I'm putting them together without words, without anything. I'm just smashing these two images together, and then you, the audience member, will find a way to associate them in your mind. And that is what you are forced to do in Spookies. You are forced to figure out how these things
as the
work
film
together.
exists now, it has what has to be termed a dreamlike logic.
Sure.
But I in the way, here's the thing. In dreams, things start and stop like with no rhyme or reason, and you just go with them generally. It's not like you say, well, wait a minute, I don't like this development. I think you need to rethink this and do this. You just go with it. It's sort of
and
happening.
You can do that in Spookies effortlessly.
Well, you can right, but if you are frustrated by the fact that like essentially a story starts, then it stops, then another one is introduced, then that one stops, and the rest of the movie is essentially these two conflicting stories trying to come together, and constantly, once you get involved with one set of characters in one situation, something else is going on with other characters that you feel like you're constantly being jerked back and forth.
Okay, one thing I was trying to remember from the screening, and I don't even remember because I just really feel like I blinked my eyes and suddenly the focus was the 70-year-old bride who was now afraid despite the fact that she was a resurrected bride. What happened to Flash Gordon and the older guy? And I forget what happened to them. What happened to them in the story? They just disappear? I don't even remember.
Oh my God.
Like,
those are all the monster scenes. You don't remember?
No. Yeah, I mean, I've obviously everybody's being knocked off one by one. My favorite being the Spider Woman, which I'm sure is like the iconic. When that happened, I was like, I mean, here's the thing: every 5 seconds, there's a crazy monster in the different part of the house, and you're like, holy shit!
That was at the core of what we were trying to do,
and it's great. And it fucking works. It's great.
Well, the thing is, I mean, look, we did this. The basic story. We were told by the backer that he wanted a rip off of The Evil Dead. So he gave us the premise. He said, I want a bunch of teenagers, and they come to a house, and this happens, and and we tried to like buck that to some degree by, for instance, none of our characters are teenagers, even though they're always thought of as teenagers.
Holy crap. Oh my God. Like the fact, like the older dude, who is like my favorite, by the way, that he just like, he kind of turns into a badass halfway through. And then he's fighting with Flash Gordon, the Flash Gordon guy. They just start fighting. It's great, man. And I'll tell you something else too. The choreography in the fight scene is great. It's really, really well done.
Oh, hey, Brendan, who directed, my partner Brendan, who directed that, would be happy to hear you say that. He was a big.
It was good. That was good.
He was a big. I mean, we were all fans of like all kinds of movies, and grew up on older movies. And he was a big fan of old movie serials. So he wanted to do a fight scene sort of in that vein, with like sort of
so perfectly
over the top type. So still like diving at a door and crashing through it.
Actually, you know what it reminded me of? Here's a obscure one for you. It reminded me of the climax of Mystery of the Wax Museum from 1932 or 33.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where right before he falls into the wax. The choreography in that was very reminiscent of Spookies in the best way. I say that in the best way possible. So no, but I'm trying to remember.
If I can just throw this in, every action and/or monster scene in the film is probably 50% or less than what we originally intended. That we had.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, a lot of it's just inexplicable. Like you mentioned the spider lady scene. That's my favorite scene in the film. I think it's the most interesting monster.
Oh, it's great. It's just like, honestly, like, here's the thing, like, it really is like what makes Spookies work so well is the combination of these quirky, wacky characters and these crazy monster in a house story. And you just like, even as it is with the director and what the new director added to it or whatever, it is such a good time. It is a good time. You're guaranteed to have a good time watching it,
That's not a universal sentiment, I can tell you. I've had people
really.
I had one time had a couple of friends hound me to see it, and I was like at that time very sort of unable to deal with the film because it had really careers in a very sad position. And eventually I moved in and showed it to these two friends of mine, and within like 10 minutes they demanded I turn it off.
Oh, that must have, yeah, but you want to know something? I think now where it's at, and this happens with films all the time. They either come out like deformed, or they come out misunderstood, or they come out and their audience hasn't been born yet. And one of those combinations. And you want to know something? Yes, Aaron, you should check it out. Absolutely check it out. You will have such a good time. Can't recommend it enough. But like, look at a great example is Mallrats, Kevin Smith's Mallrats, which was so misunderstood at the time. It was his worst movie. He considered it to be his worst movie, and he would apologize up and down. And the greatest lesson that Kevin Smith learned was just that he was early. He just couldn't understand it. And sometimes these lessons take years. They take decades until the big picture comes out,
I mean, in most cases, you don't get to do a do-over for these things. You don't get to have something reevaluated and to put everything in a different. I mean, the fact is that Spookies, after its Blu-ray release, has been so warmly released. It's like it's
very much so
considered another 80s horror classic, and that is mind destroying to me. I can't believe this. It is something I never. I mean, to tell the truth, I always felt that, like, if the film got back out there on video, it would attract some attention.
Right.
But it's been more than I expected. Meaning the fan community has just sort of picked it up and run with it. And a lot of people, have told, repeatedly, I keep hearing how people love the film. I keep getting, a lot of just positive feedback from people who remember seeing it years ago, or people who have just been introduced to it now. And it's
well. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Frank. Do you think, let's compound that question I asked you earlier. If 1986 Frank knew what was waiting for him in, after the millennium, in what in the 2010s, right? When did it come out? 2018?
I would have to wait 35 years for people to like Spookies.
Yeah, but do you think, would that have brought you some sort of solace, or would that have been a tonic on some level? Or do you think?
Well, no, because at the time I wanted to keep making films, and I had
sure.
We did, and as I told you, I continued to work with Tom Doran, and he was a brilliant creative.
Right, Sonny Bean and all that stuff.
Well, you know about some of this stuff, then. I mean, yeah, it's really the satisfaction for me. I didn't want to make movies. I didn't want fame. I didn't want fortune. I wanted to make movies. You know what I'm saying? It's like
I do know what you're saying.
It's the satisfaction of the creative process.
Yes.
And then there's the satisfaction of communicating your work and having other people react to it. And and when things go right, that's everything about it is satisfying.
And what's interesting, the things you're describing are not, isn't it interesting how, like, some people like seek out money in life. They seek out, like, there's so many things to seek out in life, but this idea of something that's like done primarily for either fame or for money, like this notion that there's actually a third option where it's literally like, I have these ideas in my head and I want to will them into existence and I want to share them with you. And the catharsis of somebody else receiving my work and understanding what I intended. It's like, I can't tell you how much I understand that. I can't even begin. Words do not describe how much I can relate to that. And we live in an age now, you were talking about technology, where, I realized, I was like, because right now things as the technology, here's the sad reality of today for today's filmmakers, myself included, who've been trying to chase the puck. We've been trying to chase the goalpost, and the goalpost keeps moving every time you reach the goalpost. It's something has changed. It evolves so quickly, and distribution is non-existent if you're an indie right now. It's never been more exciting time to make a film, because you literally can make a film for a couple $1,000s, a high concept, low budget film. It happens all the time, and every once in a while you find one that's really, really great. And you can own your work. You don't have to deal with a Michael Lee. You can be your own Michael Lee. That's not crazy.
Except, I can just intercede here. I mean, a lot of this has brought about, like, essentially, I mean, I've never had a great affection for film distributors, and
Yeah, sure.
nowadays, uh, a lot of these micro budget films that are being made, they're being picked up by various sort of
Yeah.
semi legitimate little companies who are, and some of them are actually some pretty big companies at this point, who are essentially, and they'll put this in the contract. Essentially, it's like, oh, here's where we make money for as long as we have possession of your film, and there is no possible way for you to profit.
I believe you and I are actually, I know that you and I are in the same club, and you know what I'm talking about. Online, there's a space where these things are discussed. These matters are discussed at
Right.
great length.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really great place because there's a lot of resources to enlighten oneself. And the reality is, and you're absolutely right, and that's what I was that's what I was going to say, is that they're the best way, if you're going to make any kind of money, the best thing that you can do really at this point in time is hold on to the movie yourself and put the movie out yourself by any means necessary.
Well, I think the thing is, what you have to do is do a hand-tooled publicity campaign yourself,
Absolutely.
and you have to do it on every possible level, and
Yeah.
you have to be relentless about it.
Yep.
And the thing is, you have to have confidence in your film. You have to understand who is the audience for your film.
Yep.
Right.
Sure.
But I think, especially if you've got something that there is an audience of some sort for, that, you can find that audience, and I think you can find it nowadays more easily than ever before.
Absolutely. It's easier to do that.
As you're aware, with a lot of these small distributors, they'll just they'll buy your film, they'll put it out there with 50 other movies that they're distributing, and they're not going to. What I don't understand about that kind of a game plan is, like, they don't seem to understand where they may have something that's exceptional, that they could really, with a little of the right marketing, that they could make something bigger out of it. They could make people aware of this film beyond,
because that's their business model. That is their business model, is we're not even going to look. We're just going to package. We're going to scoop this up with a net, and we're going to package. We're going to send you out with a bunch of different things. And that's why, which brings me to that second point of why deal with that when, again, it really comes down to the merit of whether people want to watch you or not. And what I mean by that is YouTube. You can have your YouTube channel in this day and age is essentially a personal broadcast station. I mean, we are literally broadcasting right now, and we are broadcasting. If somebody in France were to click on their smart TV right now, next to Hulu or Netflix or whatever they have, and click on YouTube and type in Frumess and open it up, they would see us right there on their flat screen smart TV, right next to Titanic or Avatar or anything else. And it's just like, if you can get this monetized, then, you can just have one evil partner instead of three middlemen trying to fuck you. You could just deal with Google instead of all the middlemen. And I'll tell you something, I didn't start making money off of my creative work until I monetized my YouTube channel. And now I actually make money every month that pays some of my bills every month, my creative work. And it really taught me something, instead of, because here's at the end of the day, a lot of these distribution contracts that we're talking about, they're validation. It's just validation. That's all it is, because you're not seeing any money. There's barely any money being made. It's more like, my thing is on this platform with every other thing. Whoopity do.
Well, a lot of these filmmakers, as you're probably aware, they're just grateful that their film is out there, and they're not even, any thoughts of money. That's really kind of not their priority.
Yes, but my point is that like, they're allowing, but it's like they are allowing these companies to take money that's being made in exchange for being on, these platforms. And what I think is kind of cool, or what I really like about YouTube, is that it's like sort of kind of punk rock, in the sense that, like, you literally, there are some people that put their movies on their channel, and the movies rake up millions and millions of hits. And if they're monetized, they're making thousands of dollars. They're making thousands and thousands of dollars. And you want to know something? They didn't have to pay a middleman at all. All they did was upload their movie. And I just feel like I just think it's so exciting is what I think it is. I think it's really exciting. And I just, I just don't see any reason at this point in time with money guarantees gone, minimum guarantees are gone now. I just don't like, what is the point? Because here's the thing. We talked about how it's not about the money, and you're right. It's not about the money, but at the same time, a sustainable system would at least allow a filmmaker to take money that they made from one movie and reinvest it into the next one. Because movies cost money.
But I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's a more level playing field now. It's still not really entirely level. The studios and the bigger companies still have they have the marketing, they have the publicity budget, they have the ability to attract name talent, and they have this, and they already have distribution locked in place. So it's impossible to compete with that when you're, just a tiny little film. I mean, but movies get through. Movies come out that, I mean, to tell the truth, this past Halloween has been remarkable for horror movies.
Terrifier 2, Terrifier 2,
Terrifier 2, which made for depending on what version of the story I've read, is true anywhere from
250.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That was the other end of things. But even then, that kind of ratio hasn't happened in maybe I don't know what, 15, 20 years almost.
It's been a very long time. And I got to tell you something, and I've admitted this publicly before, not a fan of the first Terrifier. I watched it, was not my cup of tea personally. However, I am so happy for the filmmaker and the team and the crew. It's so nice to see somebody break through and see that word of mouth. It's beautiful. And even though it's not my cup of tea, I have a shit-eating grin, and I'm on the sideline just going, "Go baby, go baby, go!" Because I think it's just, I think it's tremendous. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I enjoyed both the films.
I have not seen the second one yet. By the way, I have not seen the second one yet.
The second one is much better than the first one in almost every way.
Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little more thoughtful. There's an actual story of sorts. Some of the other characters are somewhat engaging enough. But I think what happened there is an interesting sort of juxtaposition too, because it came out, I think, just a day or two or a few days after Halloween, the Halloween film came out, right, which was a huge disappointment to almost everybody. I don't know. I mean, to tell the truth, it wasn't.
I liked it. I'm not a big Halloween. I'm not it's not a sacred franchise for me. So I went in with no expectations. I had a good time. I was like, all right, this is fine. I like at least until the end.
To me, it's almost every one of the Halloween movies, with the exception of the first one and the third one, which is an entirely different story being told. Right. I get bored. It's just all right. It's I don't. If you're going to do a formula film, play with the formula, do something.
Agree. Thoroughly agree.
And then the opposite end of that, which I don't understand with a lot of sequels, is that they completely throw away everything that was established.
Right. And it just doesn't resemble. It is it completely loses its identity because they go so far off the beaten path.
Well, it was like the last Texas Chainsaw film, which that almost played like it was written by somebody who had a friend describe to him the story of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and say, "Oh, could you write a sequel to this? You can't see the film, but could you write a sequel to what I just told you?"
I have to tell you, so here's the thing. Again, not a sacred cow for me, but I worship the first one, obviously. I had fun. I had fun with that one. And here's the other thing too, just to harp back on Halloween 3, talk about the premier example of what we were talking about, the Renaissance movie that, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is great as well with Dennis Hopper.
One of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, that is just balls to the walls fun. But this notion that, I'm sorry, say that again.
Gabe Bartalos worked on it.
Oh, I mean, that dude is a friggin' rock star, man. He's done everything. He really has. It's kind of crazy. I really want to talk about Street Trash for a little bit before we wrap up here. but yeah, Halloween 3 is that great example of that movie that had its resurgence 30 years after it came out. People fell in love with that movie in 2012, about 10 years ago.
Misjudged at the time because it wasn't a sequel to what they were expecting.
Right.
And I think the audience and the critics just sort of said, well, why did you bother to do this? This isn't what we wanted.
You know that scene? I always reference the scene in Back to the Future Part 2 when Marty sees the hologram for Jaws 19. And it's like it's played off as a goof, like that they would make 19 Jaws films, like something. Yeah, we do have 4 Jawses, but the idea that Jaws really is just like a singular story, it contains story within it itself. The idea that they're them doing the same formula 19 times. And I like to argue that we're actually living in the alternate reality where they made 15 Michael Myers movies, and that they are the real timeline. They followed through with the Halloween 3, and they made it into an anthology series and have kept it fresh this whole time.
Yeah, it probably would have been like essentially consistently good.
Right. And we're living in that parody universe where we seriously take on 15 Michael Myers movies with bleeding interest.
I'm not against sequels or remakes or reimaginings or franchises.
Right.
I'm against a lack of imagination. And
me too.
I feel like anytime you're just sort of treading water and just giving, all right, here's more of the same and more of the same and more of the same. What I don't understand, and I felt this like since I was young, is that people, film companies that are doing this kind of stuff, especially horror or genre that people generally get into because they love it.
Right.
They should be like looking for like real talent because there's tons of it out there. Instead, they're perfectly happy to get, hacks to just keep churning stuff out or, whatever. They're not, they need to have a little more respect. I'd almost say similar to what, I don't know if you've seen the new Guillermo del Toro series.
I am in the middle of savoring it. I love that you just brought that up. I'm on episode. I'm about to get to Panos Cosmatos' episode, The Viewing. I am savoring it. Flawless.
That's the one I'm up to too.
Okay, it is. There is every episode has been just like unreal. I'm so happy with this show. I cannot tell you how I have savored. Usually I'll binge like an 8 episode series in like a day or something. I'm like slowly savoring these episodes, like watching with my utmost attention because of how good it is. I love it.
Right. And Del Toro, whose work I highly respect. I'm
Same.
sure the goal in doing this is he said, all right, I want to get like really talented people who I know are going to do the best fucking job that they possibly can.
Sure.
That's their only motivation here. And I wish film studios operated that way, where they brought in people who they knew because of their passion. Well, obviously they'd have to prove a little bit of talent and ability, but
sure.
The fact is, with passion, you'll pull everything through. You'll get to the end. You'll try to give them the most satisfactory end result that you can.
So if I was Jason Blum, Jason Blum from Blumhouse,
yes,
and I was making movies for $3 million, because that's what he does. He makes a movie for like $1 to $4 million, right? And they have ginormous returns. By the way, to correct you, actually, Get Out was $4 or $5 million, and it made $200 million or $150 million. So that was another big one. That was 2017.
I see that Terrifier is on a different level. Terrifier was like basically
because it was just 6 figures because it was smaller. True. Yes,
Get Out.
You're right.
He was already a major television star.
Get Out was made by a studio, and Terrifier was not. You're right. Okay. So yes. So then I stand corrected, actually. But if I was Jason Blum, I would take the budget. I would write off 2 of those movies. Let's say that you take $6 million, 2 $3 million movies. Okay, we're not going to make these $3 million movies, and instead, let's take that $1 million and chop it up into 10 pieces, or even more. Let's chop it up. let's chop up some of them into 20 pieces, $50,000 each. And let's go out there and just, we're going to issue these as grants and let filmmakers.
Right.
Could you imagine, I don't know how many, sorry, I'm really bad with math. Let's see here, 10, 60, that's 60 movies. If you did 100K, you gave 60 filmmakers $100K budget. You got to imagine statistically that a couple of those movies are going to just be bangers.
Well, if you carefully chose the people, more than a couple would pay off.
It would just be people shit out. Studios shit out $6 million. They don't even blink an eye at $6 million. To think about like the investment in, yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. But like to think that that what they could be incubating with that kind of investment, the type of creativity they could be incubating, and they don't, and it's a shame.
I think that, as far as I'm aware, nothing of that sort has really been attempted on, at least on a feature film level.
No,
I think it's considered too risky overall. I think they just don't come to it with a certain mentality. That's why the Del Toro show, I think, is so successful, in that it's like it knows exactly what it's doing. It knows what it wants. It's not like somebody who's doing it and the only result they're concerned about is the financial one.
Right. Especially because they're not worried about box office numbers. I mean, yes, they're worried about numbers, but they're not worried about how much this is making in the weekend gross. It's already being distributed into, all these homes, so
right,
it's like,
right. And beyond, I mean, the thing is, I'm sure the show is, I mean, it look, there are probably dozens and dozens of very creative people working on all aspects of it. And in those situations, it's like, with a company like Pixar or Disney or something, I'm against filmmaking by committee, but I think working and interacting with really highly creative people, their opinions and their feelings and their thoughts and their input is incredibly valuable. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
A situation where almost everybody is a potential fan of the movie you're making, even if somebody else had made it.
Yes, this is true. And I'll tell you, I was really excited to see, I saw what's her face, Anna, she did A Girl Walks Alone at Night, and
I haven't seen that.
And you haven't seen that? You got to check that out. That is, you will really like it. From speaking to you over the last hour and a half, I think you would really enjoy it. One last thing I want to ask you before we get into street trash: have you seen Nightmare Alley? Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, and what did you think of it?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm dying to see it. The original 1940s version is one of my favorite films.
Love that version too, with Tyrone Power. It's great.
I read the book, so I'm a pretty big Nightmare Alley fan.
I think you are going to absolutely, if you remember to, after when you eventually do get to it, if you remember to, please message me and let me know what you think of it. I'm very curious to hear what you think. I think you're going to love it. Okay, so street trash. I watched, because I knew at this point, I knew I was going to be talking to you, and I knew that you were involved with street trash. So I was like, I better watch. So I watched street trash on Halloween, and I was like, okay. I've seen it millions of times, not millions of times, many times. Actually, it's one of those movies. So obviously, street trash is one of those. We were talking about. Okay, so my generation, I grew up. My core childhood memories are perusing the horror. I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times from guys like me, perusing the horror section and seeing the cover art and having it burned into your brain. And someday when you're a little bit older, being brave enough or curious enough to rent it and see what is on those tapes. Gary X says he's drinking Viper right now.
Where's he getting it?
I don't know. I hope it's not Tenafly Viper. You'll be in trouble. But the notion of like finally sitting down and watching what that cover art is describing, and Street Trash was one of those covers where it just seemed there was like a tone to that cover. It's so disturbing and eye-catching and when you watch it later on, like the tone of the film doesn't represent what that cover represents when you first see it.
Well, no. Well, here's the thing. They did that cover, and the initial thoughts on marketing it were to emphasize the melting, the gore, and that aspect.
Sure.
I feel the film, to me, that what's unique and special about the film is that it's this totally, unexpected, very multi-character,
It's a hodgepodge. There's so much going on in it.
It's not just another horror movie. I mean, if most movies would have taken the premise and it just would have been a series of people that melt, and there wouldn't have been really that much to it. This is also one of the things I think some people who have written negative reviews about it sort of can't get comfortable with. They're like, oh, it is exactly. They'll say it's a hodgepodge. It has all these other unresolved plots and all these characters, but that's what's entertaining about it.
But I don't. Here's the thing: when I say a hodgepodge, just to clarify that remark further, I don't see that. That's not a negative. In fact, so here's the thing: and this is what I wanted to. I got carried away talking about the cover art. This was the most interesting thing about. I've been watching Street Trash my whole life. In that I watched it as a teenager. The first time I saw it as a teenager, I watched it, as a young adult. I watched it in my 20s. I've watched it in my early 30s. I've watched it in my late 30s. I've watched it as a single man. I've watched it as a father. I've watched it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen it through all these different prisms. And every time I've seen Street Trash, I see something so different, or I see it from a completely different perspective. I can remember as a youth watching it and just like literally being like, okay, this is the melting people movie. Great. I want to see some people melt. That's great. I love the people melting. I don't know what the hell is going on with the plot. Like, it's all over the place, whatever. Okay, this is crazy. Well, and then the movie just ends. Well, that's weird. And then when I get older, like slowly but surely, I see every layer. And the last time I've watched it, I saw a lot of social commentary that I never really considered before. I saw it was a really interesting sort of viewing for me to sort of, I just saw it in a completely different way, all the different elements that are working together.
I mean, again, I Street Trash is a film. I'm far prouder to be associated with Street Trash and Spookies in terms of the end result.
Sure.
And I always I personally, from the first time we finalized the cut of Street Trash, I felt very satisfied with it. I felt it was incredibly entertaining. I think it's. I can still watch it and not get bored or
it's it is a low budget horror masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. I really do. And that was my feeling watching it this last time more than anything, just from the effects. And here's the thing. You got to watch it with the subtitles on. I had never seen it with the subtitles before. No, I'm serious though. I never saw it with the subtitles before. And suddenly there was so much story that I picked up on that I was not picking up on. Like, I had never considered this whole subplot of the fact that that Nikki, Mr. Duran's girlfriend, was that the mob guy who comes down was sent there by Nikki Duran in the first place. So the junker,
right.
There were all these like little details that I just didn't pick up on. And suddenly I was like, oh, that makes more sense to me now, that sort of thing. By the way, there's a song that plays on the DVD menu, the Blu-ray menu. That was written for the movie.
Oh yeah.
That blew me away because I'm like watching Nick Duran. Are you talking
about the song that Nick Duran sings?
You call me Mr. Duran.
That's a parody of Frank Sinatra's My Way.
Oh my God. Right. I was like, this song must be for the movie because the guy's name is Duran.
Believe it or not, we actually, before he was willing to do that, because Mr. Duran had gotten most of his show business experience as a nightclub and performer in Atlantic City. He was a singer primarily. Yeah. And he had to get. He wanted to get permission from Sinatra to do this parody of his song before he did it. and he got the blessing, and And I really like that for the end of the film, because it's like, it seems like
it's great.
Like this is the last ending you probably expect.
No, but you want to know something? There's like that, and then the other thing too is the scenes with Mr. Duran and what's his name? Jeffrey Franken from Frankenhooker. What's his name? Jamie.
Yeah, sure.
James. Yeah, James. You know, you see him chewing the scenery, and at the time I just gleaned, I was like, why do they, you know, I wonder if they cast him, but they didn't realize that he just was so, like, you know, that he was so capable of chewing the scenery. Did he get more scenes put in the film because of his ability to sort of be charming on screen?
Are you asking me this because you know the answer, or
No, I do not know the answer. I am like, that's the beautiful thing about like getting to like talk to filmmakers about their films.
Originally, the only scene with those two characters was outside of the restaurant, where the girlfriend is puking in the alleyway, and then the other character of Fred the bum comes along and takes it away. But that scene scored, like, we just like it, you know, just us, the crew, and the filmmakers seeing it. We loved it. You know, we just got off on and then we have to
knew it, man.
But there were other factors involved there. One is there was also the fact that I think Tony Darrow, who was who played Nick Duran, felt, I think, that he was being upstaged by James Lorenz, who was
he kind of was. I'm sorry to say. I mean,
right, but the thing is, I mean, I think that sort of worked in a positive way, and that his response to that, I think, was to start playing the scenes more aggressive and more, you know, and to really, and I think what he was sort of like taken aback by was how Lorenz was just improvising his all over the place. I mean, some of it was written, other stuff was not, and and he just, I mean, Jim had this just very low key. I mean, you've seen him, Frankenhooker, I guess, and
yeah,
stuff.
of course. I mean, we did a whole episode on Frankenhooker, and we specifically talked about him in Street Trash. And we were trying to wonder, we were pondering this on live, like we are right now. We were pondering why he is showcased the way that he is showcased for what is essentially a bellhop in this movie Street Trash, and we couldn't figure it out. And you're answering the question
because the response to him was terrific. Those scenes are very
funny, right? They are, yes.
But he was the reason, you know, more than anything, that we kept, because we realized he could just come up with stuff we didn't expect, and it got funnier, and etc. And so I think, you know, ultimately there were like, what, 3-4 scenes? I don't remember exactly. But
there's like 4 scenes, and I'll tell you something. The ending, you know what's amazing though? I had forgotten this. Like, I forget this every time I've seen Street Trash. And this last time I'm like, oh yeah, all I remember is what's his face? Bronson getting his head knocked off, and then the movie just ending. I always forget that you know, the winding theme throughout this hodgepodge is Tenafly Viper, and it melts people. And that's literally it. It's like, here's this thing that's weaved through the whole narrative. You have this unexplained liquor, which is so awesome, by the way. That makes it even better that we don't know why it happens. It's just this unexplainable element that's just so unpredictable in how it's going to melt you. And I always forget that there's a button at the end of the movie. They bring back the Tenafly Viper. What, you guys do it one more time, and it just sort of wraps up the movie so much nicer, you know?
That was a scene that was written late in the process of making the film, after we sort of got off on the scenes with Tony and with James. And,
it was perfect. Perfect.
And the thing is, it became a thing also where we gave, you know, we did an additional scene, and I think Tony started to get a little antsy about like how he wanted to like be able to like spread his wings a little more in the scenes. So he got more stuff written specifically for him, which is why that last scene is more or less the way it is. I think it all improved the film overall. And the interesting thing to me too is, like, right after that, everybody was convinced, oh, James Lorenz is going to become like well known. He's going to become a star and all, because everybody really liked him, and he seemed to have such natural ability. And then what ultimately happened is Tony Darrow started to become known for similar types of Italian gangster roles, and he became a fairly well-known actor. James has continued to work to this day, but Tony
Right.
got a little bit more high profile for a while. He did The Sopranos.
Right.
He co-starred in a Woody Allen movie. I mean, it was kind of a surprise.
And then you have like, it's weird. It's just like, yeah, it's like all these, you know what it is in a weird kind of way. How about this? It's almost like, I mean, and I say this with high praise. It's almost like the New York independent gutter trash version of Pulp Fiction in a weird kind of way. No, for real. Because
I can see what you're saying. Yes.
The reason why I say that is because you have all these different stories that sort of weave together. Hold on. We have a question from Gary X. He says, can I just ask Frank, was there craft services on the set of Street Trash?
No one was allowed to eat at any time while on set.
You had to eat out of the garbage can.
No,
that was it.
We had people doing. We didn't have a craft. We weren't a high budget enough film to have like a company that specifically was hired to do craft services for us. We had a couple of people in charge of craft services, meaning obtaining food, and narrowed it down to a few places that were in the locale that we were shooting. And it wasn't that hard to feed people.
Going back to like this idea, if you were to sort of separate all the different scenes or stories and then like consolidate them into like anthology segments, they almost kind of all fit in their own kind of way. I'm not saying that would make the movie better, because it wouldn't. It would be a little bit incoherent. It needs to have jump from one thing to the next thing to the next thing the way that it does in the movie.
Right.
But it really does have almost like an anthology-esque feel to it, because you have and I have to say, in a 2022 perspective, almost there's not a single redeemable character in the entire movie, except I've determined the kid. I guess the kid is the only.
He's supposed to be like the sort of, in a way, the emotional center of the film.
Wendy, you would think that, and I wrote this on Twitter, this was my hot take, Wendy seducing Lost Boys, right? He's a lost boy, and Wendy, who's taking care of him, but like lets him do stuff or is about to let him do stuff. And ultimately, that's Wendy's irredeemable factor in the year 2022.
The character was originally written as a 13-year-old kid. And
wow, I didn't even realize that. There you go. Oh my God.
And we wound up casting somebody who was like in their early 20s, who just looked very young.
Right.
The age is never mentioned, so whatever.
Right. But I assume that even in the movie, that he is supposed to be an underage younger brother runaway type kid. So
right. But it was
what's up, Angus? How are you? Sorry.
It was written younger. We decided against that for several reasons. One was that casting an actor below a certain age, it has all kinds of other problems associated with it. But you're supposed to have somebody on the set to teach them because they're missing school.
Right.
It's an entirely different matter. Plus, the script itself was basically so objectionable that it didn't seem likely that we could say, "Oh, we want your 13-year-old in this movie that's going to get rated X."
I mean, and you also had the mayor from the Toxic Avenger is in there as well.
Yeah, Bob Ryan, and we cast him. We hadn't even seen any of the Trauma movies that he was in at the time.
That's crazy.
Lloyd Kaufman has essentially accused us of stealing his actors, but they were just New York actors.
Yeah, it's the same scene.
It's the same. And he was a blast. He's one of the better actors in the film, I think. I think he was actually a very good actor.
Yeah, he's good. I mean, and then, it's weird. The tone goes from, okay, one thing I have to ask, the scene where we first see the first melting guy, at the beginning of the film, the iconic toilet melting scene, which is just to this day, like, mwah, like just perfect, like just pure excellence. There's a bunch of bricks that were purposely they seem like they were purposely stacked up so that when he closed the door, the bricks would fall. Can you tell me anything about these bricks? Do you remember anything
location when they were shooting that. I am guessing that probably while they were figuring things out and rehearsing and stuff, something probably fell off, and they said, "Oh well, what if like the door got shut and then this got whatever." It stuff like that.
It's such a it's such a wonderful little like thing. Like just I love that. I love that stuff. He walks through the door when there's no like walls, and then the bricks fall down. It's just such a tiny little comedic element that really kind of tells you what kind of movie this is. And then the other thing too is, can you talk a little bit? I'm sure you talked about this a lot in interviews, or whatever. The steady cam. There was a steady cam on the set.
As you might know, Jim Muro, the director.
Yeah.
At the time, he was as a 19-year-old, he was very fortunate to have been gifted with a Steadicam, and was very good friends with Garrett Brown, who was the inventor of the Steadicam. And
from The Shining, he also did The Shining, right?
The inventor of the Steadicam. Went on to become one of the major Steadicam operators, and to this day is still doing major TV and film with his director of photography on a number of things these days. But he that was like one of the big pluses that we had. I mean, that as you are aware, a lot of the film is shot with the Steadicam, and at the time that was a high production value thing. That was something
huge
Hollywood films did.
And it's funny, I was trying to explain that to my friend who I was doing the show with, and we were talking about Street Trash and Frankenhooker, and I was saying, like, yeah, that was a big deal. Like, and if you watch the movie, it just adds so much production value. This smooth camera that is just gliding all over the place, There's a scene also, I forget the black character, homeless guy, stuffing turkey, stuffing chickens down his pants.
Yes.
Like this scene, first of all, it's such a great scene. It's also like, it's so disgusting because it's like these raw chickens are going down the dude's pants. You just imagine that this guy has not had a shower in a long time, and just like all these elements. It's such a great scene. What is the genesis of this? It's just so, it's just wonderful.
I would say the script.
Right, of course.
Interestingly, that was the scene that in its original video release, which or was it I forget if it was the video and or the theatrical one, either one or both, but that was the one scene to get cut out of our original version. I'm pretty sure on the video version.
Wow.
Basically to fit it onto a 90-minute video cassette.
That's crazy, because on the I'm glad it was restored on the Synapse disc, which is the one that I have with my nifty Tenafly Viper sticker. And one of the things that I said in my review, and obviously like the Bronson stuff is great. I mean, it's just weird and brutal, and his death scene at the end is so, what's interesting? I'm watching his death scene this time, and he's sort of watching as Wendy like jumps over him, and it's like as he's dying, he's getting a brief glimpse of her crotch area. And it's like, I can't explain it, but it's like, it's just this really sort of like life is fleeting type moment. There's actually like some real poetry. I know it sounds crazy to say in a movie like Street Trash, but
I have always felt there are a lot of very nice cinematic moments in Street Trash. And that's a result of just combined effort. I mean, between the director, we had a very good DP, David Sperling, Dennis Werner, our editor, I think did a fantastic job. There was an effort. I mean, we wanted to be able to make the best film possible, but I think, there were a number of things that helped, to make it easier. One was that Jim shot an awful lot of coverage, more than you would usually shoot for the films made in that budgetary range.
Sure.
And he was able to get away with that because his dad was like basically bringing in a lot of the financing, so he was not being reprimanded.
Right. I mean, that's the beautiful thing of being able, again, when you have the ability to be in control, and then you don't have to worry about. And again, that is the also at the center axis of of commerce and art, right? But what was I going to say about not Bronson, not about the death? There was another thing. There's another element of street trash. Oh yes, the biggest crime of street trash. Here is the single biggest crime is that there are not more of them, and that we do not have a franchise of street trash. And again, yes, you very clearly emphasize that street trash is so much more than the melting elements that make it famous.
It's interesting, because you got to realize at the time that the film was made and came out, it was picked up in this country by Vestron Video under their Lightning Pictures company,
Right.
which they had just formed for the purpose of, specialty films and like films that might not be mainstream horror and that sort of thing. I think nobody was thinking like that because Vestron immediately, they bought it and then they wanted to release it as a midnight show and turn it and insist it was a cult movie before anyone had even seen it. And to me, that seemed kind of backwards. It's like a cult movie is a cult movie because
you have to earn it. You have to earn it.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, street trash in the years since can certainly be considered a cult movie.
100% a cult movie now.
Pretty big cult. Yeah. But at the time, I just thought, all right, you can't tell people here's a cult movie. No one has called it a cult movie except the distributor.
That's what happened with Repo, the Genetic Opera. They were marketing it as a cult movie. They were trying to do a Rocky Horror Picture Show thing for it. And I'll tell you, it came off as disingenuous as a result. You can make a midnight movie, or you can make a movie that might have midnight movie vibes, but you can't call anything a cult film. You just can't do it. It has to be it's like getting a nickname. You don't ever come up with your own nickname. People give you a nickname. You have to earn the ability to be a cult movie. And I just feel like the idea of Tenafly Viper, particularly spinning off into, like, it captures my imagination. Again, I was talking about how I love that we don't know the origin, but a part of me, like, I just have to know more about Tenafly Viper. I want to know why it does what it does, where did it comes from. It's 60 years old. The movie came out in 1987, so that means it was produced around 1927. It's rot gut whiskey, and for those of you out there who don't know what rot gut is, that's what's so cool about street trash and Tenafly Viper, is this idea that it's an alliteration of rot gut whiskey, which is something also from Nightmare Alley. It's something that transients and bums and hobos would drink, and it was not really fit for human consumption. It would rot your guts out.
And originally, I mean, the two famous New York brands of low budget wine were not Tenafly Viper, were Night Train Express and Thunderbird.
Thunderbird is a very famous one. Yes,
I believe it mentions by name that it's like, Thunderbird or something. I can't recall quite which one, but and then if I recall, we approached the actual liquor companies and they certainly didn't want their product depicted this way. So that didn't work. But I think we were much better off coming up with our own name brand. Especially considering it's still so well known after all these years.
There's a band called Tenafly Viper.
I know, I've heard this.
I mean, but I just but that's what kills me, is that, like, I need more. I want more. And the idea that, like, I don't know, it just really captures my imagination. And yes, obviously there's, as we said, street trash is so much more. It really is. It's like a low budget horror pulp fiction in and of itself. But the main element is the melting. That's the star. That is what drives people to the movies in the first place. But what's interesting too is that on the sidebar, again, because of the subtitles this time, I was like, oh, there's this whole subplot where the cop is trying to figure out if there's a serial killer that's melting people. I was like, as I said, I've seen this movie so many times. I don't ever remember that.
I mean, our sound isn't that bad. All that stuff is audible.
I know, but you want to know something? I have found, I can't tell you, this is not just with street trash. Maybe it's just me personally, Frank. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I can't tell you how many times I've watched a movie with subtitles on, and I'm like, oh, like, there's so many times where, like, a great example, Fury Road. If you watch Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road with the subtitles on.
That I can believe, because there's all kinds of mutterings of stuff and things that are
oh my God. There's a whole fucking, there's so much story. There's so much story in the few brief musings. Have you seen Mandy?
Yes.
Mandy 2. If you watch Mandy with the subtitles on, one of the biggest complaints about Mandy was that it had no story. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. There's so much character and story going on in Mandy. You just have to know where to look for it. And it's very subtle. And some of it is in the dialogue, which you need, or at least I needed subtitles for in order to really understand what is going on. So yes, of course I heard people talking. I heard Bronson, the best part about Bronson is that he still, he talks about the men. Don't disrespect me in front of the men. Such a great little gag. But the stuff doesn't come through always. And I was blown away watching this movie. By the way, also long before we had Dead Girl, we had, what's his name? The mayor from Troma. What's his name again?
Bob Ryan.
Yeah. You have Ryan finding the dead girlfriend who dies in, what's funny, again, going back to the tone, and we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Frank again so much for being on the show. Just like you rule. You were just awesome. You're an awesome
and I'll take the moment to thank you now again.
Oh, please. The what happens to the mobster's girlfriend is so horrifying and so horrific, and it's played off as such. The tone of it is comedy. It's supposed to be funny, but when you actually think about it, like, holy shit,
the movie does take a much darker turn.
Gets so dark.
And to tell the truth, it's like I've talked to people about that in recent years, and it's like, I guess it's debatable how maybe it should have been played differently. But
no, it is what it is. It's just a product of its times. But like
at the time, it was intended to be more horrific than funny. Certainly.
Really?
I mean, I know a lot of it. I understand how ridiculous a lot of it is, but it's still, I'm sorry, it's like it still boils down to like a woman being like raped by like 20, vagrants, who are standing
it's like, you imagine that, like, that's what's crazy about it. You know what it is? It's like, it's presented so matter-of-factly, like there is no, actually, it does get a little kind of Night of the Living Dead-ish when they like rip open the junkyard pile and pull her out. But you're almost kind of like watching, you're like, wait a minute, is that in this movie? Because this movie doesn't feel like that kind of movie. And then it goes there, and you're like, that's what I mean by like the tone being different. And then long before we had I don't know if you've ever seen Dead Girl. Long before you have Dead Girl, the idea of like what happens when you find a dead body, what do you do, is answered by the actor, what's his face, Ryan, who solves his blue balls problem in he's quite the opportunist. Let's just say that he never turns down any sort of opportunity, whether it's an opportunity or not, which is obviously is not.
Even if someone might spot him doing it in public.
Yeah. But the idea that, and it's so funny too, because they're like, yeah, we figured out there were at least three. We have 3 different types of semen, and the last one had gonorrhea. And he's like, oh, it's like, it's crazy, man. And then of course we didn't even speak about the fact that somebody's dick gets cut off.
Oh, yes, somebody.
Yeah, and then and by the way, again, like I said,
you're aware that's me, aren't you?
Wait, that was you? Of course, that's you. Holy shit! Holy shit, that is you. You get your dick cut off.
I do.
All right, you don't know how surreal this is for me right now, because
it's surreal for me at the time.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I'm sure. But like, okay, that's even crazier. That was you.
I'm glad you're so
oh
pleased.
My God, I'm tickled pink. I'm tickled pink because here's the other interesting thing that the concept here. when you watch movies over and over again, remember what I talked about at the beginning when I was talking about Dawn of the Dead and the idea that like there's Dawn of the Dead, the film that was made by people, by human beings, and it was just a movie. It's just a movie like any other movie, but whatever. And then there's the immortal Dawn of the Dead that is, canonized on celluloid and is an artifact, and that there's some sort of realism to the fact that there really are zombies, and that these are, every time that you watch Dawn of the Dead and you see this zombie or that zombie, and you don't think that that's an extra who has their own life, and gone on to do their own thing and be their own person. For you, they are that thing forever. And it's like, I'm like realizing that, like connecting those dots, like how many times I've watched that scene and now I'm talking to the guy who was in that scene. That blows my mind. Like that's what's crazy. That will never ever get old. That will never get old. That is so funny. You pee on Bronson.
No, I don't. No. Well, actually, yes. So, pardon me. I forgot. Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Yes. And then he cuts off your dick. Well, not your dick. He cuts off the bum's dick with his femur knife, and then they're playing keep away with it. And again, going back to almost every single character, maybe not every single one, almost every single character, is like despicable in some way, shape, or form. In this case, they are literally playing keep away from you, a poor man who's just trying to get his dick sewn back on. And then that guy who catches your dick and he throws it again, he ends up getting exploded by the Tenafly Viper. And it's just desserts. It's like, you don't keep a guy's dick away from him. You just don't do that. And he got his just desserts, and that's it.
Well, if you're living in a junkyard, it's like you can't expect to be, respected the way you might be in.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, I feel like there's plenty of like social commentary to be sort of plucked out of street trash. Like, it's not just like an exploitation film. It's not like, just a horror film. Like there is plenty of theme that you can sort of pull out of it.
There are many influences. I mean,
sure.
Like more than most people who've seen it probably realize. I mean, and one of the major influences was simply living in New York City at the time.
Yes.
Where there was a huge homeless population.
Yes.
And that's how, I mean, to see homeless people on the street trying to wash windshields or arguing with each other. I mean, this was just part of the atmosphere of New York City.
And that's what's so amazing about that scene when you look, again, Brain Damage and Basket Case and I Was a Teenage Zombie and Frankenhooker. All of these movies capture Street Trash, Trauma. All these movies capture that New York, which no longer exists. And that's so often true in the same way that George Romero made Martin he wanted to talk about decrepit or crumbling cities. That was one of the themes in Martin. And that is something it's taking something from real life and transforming it into a cinematic story. And that is what Street Trash is doing with that. So that brings us to the 2-hour mark, which was a little bit more than I anticipated. But I want to thank Frank so much for coming on.
I throw in a couple of plugs before we.
Are you kidding me? Plug away. Go for it. Let's hear them all.
One is, I mean, a little while ago you mentioned like why hadn't Street Trash had a sequel or why wasn't it a franchise? And I was trying to explain before. The main reason was it was not released like a regular movie. It wasn't thrown in like 100 grindhouses across the state at a time. It was like in 1 or 2 theaters in one city at a time. So it had a different type of release with different intentions. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, and I guess you're not aware of this, that there is a Street Trash remake that has been announced and will probably
impossible. That's impossible.
Oh, not at all. No.
How could they possibly remake? Like, here's the thing. Look,
it's a remake in conceptually. It's not precisely the same story.
Okay, because I got to tell you, there are movies. There are some movies that can't be remade because they're like, look, like Jaws is kind of an unremakeable movie. You can't remake Jaws. There's no way.
There would just be like no point in doing it.
No, but I'm saying, like, how could you, let's say that you try to tell the story of Jaws again, or Back to the Future for that matter, really. There are some movies that are just so, like, unique in what they are. Like, you cannot remake them. Street trash.
It's not just a matter of the story, it's a matter of all the elements of the production. It's the direction, acting, it's every element of filmmaking that contribute and combine to make something especially memorable.
By the way, I just want to say I am all for and super excited for anything street trash, and I will watch this remake with great enthusiasm.
I'm gonna mention the fact that did you happen to see the movie, or which you've probably heard of at least, called Fried Barry?
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay,
yes,
Ryan
on Shudder.
Fried Barry is the director of the new Street Trash.
Okay, that makes me even happier because that is the guy. Yeah, that's the guy who you want to have him working in the street trash world. But here's the thing about street trash. That movie is literally unremakeable. Like, whatever they're going to do and just call it street trash will be fine, and I will enjoy it.
To make the same type of movie stylistically would just be, I mean, I don't think you could quite recreate it. If you did, it would be a conscious mess, probably.
Yeah, you can never recreate street trash. However, so when I see this remake, I'll just think of it as like a continuation or a spiritual companion, because to me, like, you literally could not, there's no way to remake street trash. You just can't do it. But if you're going to do more stuff with like Tenafly Viper and people fucking melting, fuck yeah, dude. I'm all like, do it. I'm all about it. Are you personally involved with this production?
I am not directly involved, although I've had a few online chats with Ryan Kruger.
Awesome.
And I've also been in touch with, and I recently got a chance to finally meet a fellow named Justin Martell, who's one of the producers of the new Street Trash. And
awesome.
I'm very, I'm enthusiastic about it because as we both agreed, I mean, Ryan Kruger is the right director to try and do something like that. If it, I would be like probably very, very down on it if it was just picked up because some studio thought they could make a few dollars off of it.
Right. Listen, I'm sure. Listen, in fact, so here's the thing. As I just said, that it's unremakeable, but at the same time, the concept or take, as you said, just taking the concept and doing something with it, I'm all for that. And I'm all for, like, as I said, give me more. And if that means in that way, I'm down. But the idea, the notion of trying to remake something like Street Trash, it's a singular movie in its creation. Like, you just can't.
Look, the only movies worth remaking, as far as I'm concerned, are the movies that weren't that good the first time around. But maybe
I agree.
They had a chance of being good if somebody had bothered to do a little bit more work on them.
There's a lot, and I have a list. I have like a running list of movies like that, and I'll give you a great example of one that I don't think is a bad movie. I think it's a terrific movie, but I just want, again, maybe I don't want a sequel. I mean, I don't want a remake. I just want more. Is Brian Usna's Society. I want to see that story again and again and again. But then you have movies like what's interesting is King Kong has been remade several times. Right. Why is King Kong remakeable, but something like Jaws is not? It's like a weird sort of notion.
Jaws is a more limited concept. I mean, there's only so many variations of that you can do. The scenes, anything involving a killer shark is going to have to involve more or less the same types of situations and settings. King Kong, I find it interesting that it's actually become Kong has become a recognizable and modern day movie property and a franchise. I mean, my favorite certainly is the original from the 30s, which is one of the films that had the biggest influence on me as a kid. But I think it's I think there's a kind of a universal fascination with the whole concept.
Was there more stuff? Because I interrupted you when you said there was going to be a remake, which again, I am, don't get me wrong. When I say that it's an unremakeable movie, I am ecstatic that there's something is happening with Street Trash. I want something to happen with Street Trash. I just personally think I'm like, how could you possibly recreate that? You can't. You'd have to just do something.
No, it's not. It's an attempt to take the premise and do something different with it. There would be no point in trying to. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think some of them, especially if they have a distinct style or they have other qualities that are unique to that film, trying to recapture that is like really stupid thing. I think ultimately.
But I'm sure they will find a way. And the anchor there is Tenafly Viper. You start with the Viper and you work your way out from there. And I'm sure that I mean, because when you think about what's the one element that's synonymous with Street Trash that really lends itself to be elaborated on, and it's really Tenafly Viper, right? You're not going to do it about Bronson. You're not going to do it about the bellhop, right?
Well, that was. I mean, you mentioned Roy Frumess a little while ago. He actually wrote a sequel script to Street Trash.
Get out of here!
But the money could not be obtained.
Wait, there was a sequel written for Street Trash?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here! Wait, whoa! When was this written? And
I tell the truth, I have not read it.
Okay,
but I have been told that included I think it may have been shortly after 9/11 because I know there's supposedly scenes in it on the rubble of the World Trade Center. That
is shocking to me. Not the 9/11 thing, just that there was a sequel, a sequel was written. That's
an attempted sequel. It's
whatever. I mean, it was still written. It's written.
Right.
Doesn't mean.
Bear in mind at that time the film had still not attained as much notoriety as it has.
In 2001, it was. Listen, I remember
I don't know, around. It was around there. It might have been a few years after.
I'll tell you something. I remember. I can remember from the 90s as a child. I can remember Street Trash. Street Trash was a thing. It was absolutely a thing. It may not be what I feel like it really exploded in the 2000s. In the 2000s, when it really exploded. But Street Trash had a reputation. Street Trash was like a movie, like a cult movie in the 90s.
It had the reputation with fans. I think distributors and production houses, if you approach them with something like that, unless you can point to some solid box office that it had at one point or another, that it's kind of difficult because you're talking about a film that, it's a lot of people know it. Yeah, a lot of people really like it. Yeah, it's pretty universally recognized at this point. And they're going to look, well, how many, big grossing weekends did it have?
Right. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick plug for our sponsor, and we're going to wrap up this show.
I have one more.
Oh, please, plug away. Go ahead.
I have just finished. I think I have finished the second draft of the Spooky sequel.
Stop! Yes. See, that's taken. Yes, man.
Which I think of as the anti-Spookies.
You should call it anti-Spookies.
I wish we could. I was basically told by one of the people I'm working with that for the purposes of raising money, we have to call it Spookies too.
If you want to do a successful crowdfunding campaign, which I'm sure you could do in a heartbeat.
Our ambitions are to go a bit beyond that. I'm looking to raise a fair amount more than that. It's a very different storyline, very different premise, very ambitious in a lot of ways. It is an action adventure horror comedy.
Beautiful.
I think most fans of Spookies would be surprised by it.
Well, listen, if and when you do end up, if there is any kind of crowdfunding campaign, or if there is any kind of anything, please, you are so welcome back on the show to talk about it, to raise awareness about it. I would love to have you on again to speak about it.
At the moment, I think we're going to look to some slightly bigger possible financing entities and see what we can do. I mean, the thing is that this is sort of the this is the first time in my life I can like look back and say, all right, I had a fairly recent film that made some money, and I think the fact that there's a very interesting, very different type of a script that I've done here that is based on a story that was written actually by my late partner Tom Doran, like back in 2013. Which was
got the pedigree.
He came up with on the really, really far away possibility that someday somebody may ask for a Spookies sequel.
You want to know something? And you know who's going to eat that up in 2 seconds? Like somebody like Shudder or somebody like one of these.
I want to talk to them about potentially getting involved. I mean,
I'll tell you something. That's like the type of thing that gets like a Shudder original, Shudder exclusive sort of situation. That's where all the horror fans
it would be perfect. Also because they were one of the first people to show it on any kind of streaming situation, and Joe Bob Briggs did one of his shows about it, right, and that alone is, I think, he did Street Trash also at one point. He did Spookies like literally like 6 months after I wrote to him and said, hey, you should do Spookies. And awesome. I have to meet Joe Bob. I have not met him, but I feel grateful to him because he has probably introduced that film to more people than anybody else.
I'm sure, and I'm sure that also builds interest with a company like Shudder or whoever. Just the idea that
the fact that they can be approached, they can say, "Oh, here's this film that you have shown in not just one version, but 2 technically."
Right. Well, listen, congratulations on that. And on writing the sequel, or at least, shaping it up, and, it going back to this long, tedious process, this theme that we've been discussing. It's like you went on the journey that you went through, and it's brought you to this place where Spookies is a cult classic. It's beloved. And now you're gearing up to potentially do Spookies too. So
somebody is willing, I'm at an age now where most people would be considered washed up and too old to be making movies, at least in Hollywood.
You're never too old to be making movies. That's bullshit.
No, I agree. But you got to realize, I'm specifically talking about the Hollywood scene where
right.
And it may have, the whole business has loosened up a little bit in the past 10 or so years. Streaming and technology and things have changed a lot of aspects of it, but I think in Hollywood for so long, I mean, it's there was a time, and it can't be that much difference now. We're like, the minute you hit 40, you were too old to essentially be working.
Right, and that is definitely not true in this day and age, and friggin' that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a fortunate position right now. I have made films, and I have fans of all ages. We did a screening at the Alamo in the Mahoning Drive-In. Not that part. We did the screening at the Alamo, and then we did the Mahoning Drive-In. Do you know the Mahoning at all?
I conducted a Q&A with Wes, from the Road Warrior.
Oh, really? Wow, with Vernon Wells.
Yeah, I did 2 Q&As with Vernon Wells. I was the guy that was asking. Those are on my YouTube channel. I'll send them to you. That was a trip, man. That was really cool to meet him. And those were really raunchy too. He got some weird questions. I was asking him some really weird shit. And there's some funny stuff on those. But yes, the Mahoning is great. And
yeah, but they did a showing of Spookies as their last show of the season. They brought me in.
So you met Mark.
I met Mark. Yeah, I met like
Mark. Isn't Mark great? Mark and what's her name? Valeria. God, I'm trying to remember her name.
I think that something like that.
Forgive me for butchering your name. I'm trying. It's something I read often on Facebook. I see them all the time. Mark Nelson. I see them all the time at the Alamo Draft House constantly. She's always tagging me too when we're at the same screening. It's so funny. I turn around and there they are, and they are lovely, lovely people. They're great, truly.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm pretty happy with where things are at right now, meaning that I'm getting attention and recognition that I couldn't have paid for 20 or 30 years
right
ago.
By the way, it is Valeria. I was right. I just wanted to make sure because I felt really bad that I had butchered her name.
And I'm so I emphasize this anytime I've spoken to people or made any kind of a public appearance. I'm so grateful to fans.
Yeah,
because they're the reason that the film has the attention that it has at this point, that it's been sort of adapted into the pantheon of 80s horror standards, so
canonized.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the people at the last drive-in were so fond of it that they came out with a vinyl record album recently.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Like, with a cover that's sort of a parody of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, and
oh my god,
and there's like 150 monsters on it, right? And there's like 3 characters from Spookies and 1 from Street Trash.
Wow. Oh my god, we didn't even talk about that friggin' guy. Oh my, the guy whose face you always see. And I was always like, because they always recognize it on the cover, but I didn't realize, I mean, you weren't there when they shot his part, but like that guy, the wizard guy who's become synonymous with Spookies.
About him. He was part of the second shoot. They brought him in. He has no other acting credits that I am aware of.
So weird.
Told me anything about him. I can't tell you.
That is weird. That is weird, and that is sticky. And you know what else is sticky? Do you know what else is sticky, Frank? Stickers. And here at the Frumess channel, we are sponsored by riotstickers.com. They are our backers, they are our sponsors, and we are doing a special promotion with riotstickers.com. As you can see, we have these stickers. They have a special UV coating on them, and they're printed on vinyl, so they're waterproof and they are sunproof. And that you can get 3-inch by 3-inch vinyl stickers, 1,000 for $79. That's about 7 cents per sticker. You can't find a better deal than that. Only at riotstickers.com/Frumess. So we don't have a promo code anymore. We used to have the Frumess promo code. That's gone now. And it's all about riotstickers.com/Frumess, FRUMESS. You click there. That's the only place you're going to be able to get 1,000 stickers for $79. We're going to play the very quick 60-second theme song and video, and then we will say our goodbyes. Hold on 1 second here. Where is it? There she is.
Hi, I'm a guy from riotstickers.com.
Nope, that's the wrong one. My bad.
Posters and promo cards, there's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. We are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
Riot Stickers, we're the bomb. This was, I got to tell you,
the first I have ever seen for a printing company.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll let Sharpie Riot know that you said that. He's awesome. That Riot Stickers, I'm telling you, if you ever need any stickers printed up, you can't find a better deal than that. They're great. They really are tremendous. Super independent DIY business, very personable. They're great. They printed this banner behind me. They printed that banner. So they really like that. Yeah. I really want to, I got to say, Frank, I had such a good time speaking with you just about movies and filmmaking. That's great. That's really glad to hear that. And I want to extend this invitation back to you to come on the show again anytime you need to promote something, or you know what we do, and I think it would be really great. And I'm only saying this because I think because you are so knowledgeable about films. Like, you really are like well versed, and you could talk film really well, and you're just like you really do. You know your stuff. I would love to invite you back on the next time we're doing, we do them from time to time, but we'll figure out a good one that works for you. We do a top 5. And the way it works is you pick top 5 movies for something. Like in the past, we did top 5 death scenes, or we did top 5 third horror sequels, like, stuff like that.
Right.
And the way it works is you pick 5 movies, but you don't tell the other people. So you wouldn't tell me, and you wouldn't tell the co-host Bob. You wouldn't tell us what yours are, and if we overlap, you have to replace that one. So it's like a game of horse. You can knock out the other person.
Oh, okay.
So if you both have Day of the Dead as your number, on your list, and you say it first, then because you go around in a circle, then the other person has to replace Day of the Dead with an alternate pick. And it's really stupid and really fun. And we just talk movies, and we have a great time doing it. And I think you'd be so good on a show like that. So if that ever interests you, I'll let you know. I'll let you know when the right kind of show for you.
Fun. I'm game. Cool. Just hit me up.
I very much will. All right, guys, we're gonna say goodbye. As always on the channel, we say peace and hair grease, and we will see you tomorrow night. We actually have another episode of Pizza Punk. Wait, you never told me, is Pizza Punk?
Well, I've been waiting for you to make sure that I had a moment to ask.
I totally forgot. I totally forgot to ask you.
Well, here's my answer to that.
Yeah.
First of all, anything can be punk. You can have a punk attitude in any field, in any profession, in any work of art, in any statement. It's just an attitude, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And you're right. I
associate pizza with punk because I used to, at one time, I lived in Lower Manhattan on Avenue A, where like all the there were like half a dozen like little clubs there playing nothing but punk music all the time, and there were also like a half a dozen pizza parlors.
Pizza Punk.
Yes, so they go very well together.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful. See, I never get the same answer, and it's always something interesting, and that's true, man. Punk is just an attitude, and it's just how you could apply it to anything. Beautifully said, Frank. Okay, now we're really saying goodbye this time. We say peace, hair grease. Hang on one second, Frank.
Very nice to be here, and I'll be looking forward to coming back.